bike you rode in South America?
Mainly my brother rode it.
Yes.
Because I was riding Penelope. Steph and I were on this one.
Yes.
My brother was on this one usually, and we had a third motorcycle which was the same as this one.
Yes.
Which is a Panther, made in Yorkshire. Small number made each year, and in fact I've met the man I call my obstetrician, the guy who breathed life into Penelope. I went back to the area in 2007.
Whereabouts is that, Yorkshire?
Cleckheaton. And the Panther Owners Club have a rally nearby, so
yes.
we camped nearby, then went to the hotel at adjoining the factory. And of course all the old duffers who worked in the factory and the old ladies, they toddle along to see the Panthers that they've built. And so I met the man who built my engine.
Wow.
And it's just quite amazing to know that he did the crankshafts, and they put the cranks in and the crankcases together. So yeah, Penelope's done now 50 countries.
Wow. 50 countries.
That's amazing.
So this is one of the bikes that went on the Beijing to Arnhem tour?
Yep. That's So that in the 70s went from New Orleans to Buenos Aires with Steph and I on it.
Yes.
And then with usually with my son Steve on the back, went from the Beijing to Arnhem. Although sometimes Steve was riding the other bike for Norton. And they get used.
They're not museum pieces.
No. I mean, I'll show this one will probably start first kick. Usually does. Even in Crocs. There, just because you've got a camera.
Yes, exactly. Whoa, yeah.
Unless he's talking.
Yep. There she goes. There she goes. Indeed. That sounds better. Great.
Fantastic.
Steph always reckons she gets a bit of spillage on the seat, but she's perched on the back, and we've done numerous North Island loops and
It reminds me of
South Island loops.
Dr. Granado's bike that Che went on.
Right.
The Motorcycle
similar.
Diaries.
And when we watched the movie,
Yes.
we could see the roads that we'd ridden on, and we're sitting in the
Wow.
movie theatre, and I went with my brother first, and he'd say we'd done the same roads together, because it was a one-off screening in Wellington, and they never knew whether it was going to get popular release, and so we'd taken time off work, and Steph couldn't, and when I went home, he said, "Oh, it's so good, so good." And then a little bit later they did release it sort of into the normal theatres, and then her and I went, and as soon as she saw the roads, we could remember the exact corners, the bits in the Andes that they filmed.
Yes.
Were the same runs that we'd ridden on the very similar era motorcycle.
Exactly.
The girder forks, the rigid rear end, and it was just like riding it again. It was just so very, very evocative.
That's my ultimate movie. It's got both motorcycles and Che. I mean, you don't get better than that.
No, and that was one of the ones that we also watched numerous times to look for motorcycle filming, and then also the long way round.
Yeah.
And of course this is the Zen BMW. It's magnificent.
Yep, the Zen bike. Yeah.
James has quite an interest in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which is a cult book of the 70s.
Yes.
And in 2006 we recreated the journey, because the book, which is a book of philosophy, the biggest selling philosophy book of all time, it was based on a real journey. A mentally unstable man and his son riding across the States with his friend for most of it, and the friend was on a BMW, and Robert Persig himself was on a Honda, which we purchased a 305 Honda from 1965.
Was it a Super Hawk?
Superhawk, yeah.
Superhawk.
77
Yeah.
Superhawk.
So what year is this?
65.
So even then, fantastic panniers. Or these are add-ons?
Yeah, these are an American period. It's a replica of an American period bag.
Yeah.
BMW didn't do it themselves, but it's an American replica. So no, that's one I rode, and rode across the top of the US on the back roads that Robert Persig travelled on through to.
We are called Persig Pilgrims,
Yes,
all of us.
and there was evidence of numerous Persig Pilgrims along the way, because there'd been a German group on Harleys the year before us, I think. And sometimes you'd find that as stickers. It's not far from where Persig spent a night camping. Anyway, and we'd pulled into the town in the late afternoon, and a guy came running. His eyes were out on stalks, and he was grinning, and he was running and saying, "It's a pilgrimage, isn't it? It's a Persig pilgrimage. Tell me it is, isn't it?" Because what he'd spotted, he'd been going the opposite way, and he saw a 1965 BMW and a 1965 Honda 305 Superhawk together. They could only be recreating
Yes.
a Zen ride, because he had 3 copies of the book. He had a special version that he had at home pride of place, had one in his ute under his seat, which he would pull out and just read from time to time, and he had the original one that he'd had as a young person.
I've got the old dog-eared, paperback that's been many times with me on a lot of different roads.
Right, it's an incredibly difficult
Yeah.
book to read. You get people who come up to you and say, "That book changed my life," and other people go, "Oh, I tried that. I got about 50 or 60 pages and
It's too dense.
Yeah.
It's too dense.
because it goes from a really nice, evocative road trip where you're really into it, because he's got this neat road trip going and there's descriptions of the bikes and stuff like that. And then he dips back into philosophy that goes so deep and challenges thinking back as far as Socrates, and just suddenly it's just, come on, get back to the road trip, And it's very difficult to. I read it too fast when I was young, and then I thought, oh no, I'll read it before we went on the trip, because I'm an adult now, I'm a grown up, I've got all the time, and I found it still a difficult book. And then I took it with us, and I would read each day before we were going to ride the next day of where we were going, and look for the same sorts of things that Persig would have seen, and the thoughts. And then I still struggled, and then when I was putting together a manuscript, I was marrying his thoughts and my thoughts, and so I was reading it even again slower and more in depth. And it is a book that does influence you a lot. But I enjoy the bizarreness of the guy had a focus on the metaphysics of quality. It was this movement that he spawned supposedly. But the most common paperback has a spanner that sort of morphs into the lotus blossom, I think it is. And the spanner is an AF American fine spanner that could not have been used on either of the 2 motorcycles. It's just so ironic.
Yeah.
He's focused on quality, and I know with my own book, the graphic artist, he put a metric spanner on there, and I saw the black and said, "Whoa, you can't have that." I'd be just laughed out of town on my mates.
Yeah.
So he changed it to an imperial spanner.
Yeah.
And then it was, and I said, no, you've got it right. It's got to be a Whitworth spanner.
Whitworth, yes.
Not
Yeah.
AF. It's got to not just imperial. It's got to be a Whitworth.
Yeah. I had a wrench someone gave me that was a Whitworth in my set.
Yeah, BSF and Whitworth.
Yeah,
So he
BSF
changed
Whitworth.
it to that.
Yeah.
And he thought I was so fussy, but I couldn't have lived with having a spanner on the cover, and
Anachronism.
it couldn't have been on the bike.
Yes.
And I always thought that Persig would have hated that that particular edition, which seems to be the most popular of the ones you always see.
That's Beartooth.
That's
up in
Beartooth Pass, and that's-
Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the same day I had the accident. I came through Yellowstone.
Did you?
Yeah. There's the highs and the lows of that day.
Yeah. It was cold at the top of Beartooth the day we were there. This is Mongolia. That's Bolivia.
Bolivia.
Steph and I.
Okay.
That's
coming.
Copacabana, isn't it?
Yeah,
Went
Copacabana.
there a couple of years ago.
And that's just coming through the Chaco Desert in Paraguay.
Not on bike, so. Wow.
How do you stay upright in that soft-looking stuff?
It's true.
Real
Oh,
difficult.
yeah.
That was the hardest stuff, because we also couldn't get, because it's in the shape, you can ride if you can get enough speed, and then you can start to almost like a boat plane. But when you couldn't in here,
No.
and then you'd be sort of maybe prodding with your legs, and that'd get whipped back. No, without exaggerating, we nearly perished in that particular desert. We ran out of out of water, and we'd been told it would be easy and it would only take a couple of days, and it didn't.
That was the problem they had on the long way round, wasn't it? With their bikes were just so heavy. There's big BMWs on the sand. I think once you drop it, you need like 2 people to get up again.
Yeah.
There's big
How
metal
long-
panniers.
How long were you in that? How long did it take you to do what was supposed to have taken 2 days or 3?
I know we had five full meals in 13 days. I know that. But we ended up in trouble in here, and we're down to we reckoned we had 2 mouthfuls of water each for the next day, and in the middle of the night a smuggler came through the desert, creeping along in his truck, and of course we heard him, and these bearded gringos in their undies leap out in front of him, and he was sort of but he was then good, and he gave us as much water as we could take on board there, and gave us filled our water containers and gave us a bit of food, and then the next day I got out to an army base. The others sort of got stuck behind me somewhere, and I got out to this army base, and quite in my mind it's quite spectacular. And I sort of got to the top of the sand dune, and sort of the bike just bogged into the sand dune, and it sort of stayed there in the sand, and I staggered down to where it was the end of the day, and all the troops had all been brought back in, and they were all in like a quadrangular yard sort of thing, all assembled. I'm very embarrassed. I come staggering over, saying, agua, agua, water, and the big cheese was there, and he, snapped his fingers and sends someone away, and the guy comes back with a glass, and it just went. And I said, mas, por favor. So, and 7 times he sent the guy away to get 1 glass of water, and then because they were there, they were able to then get a truck and went back into the desert and found the other 2 and put their bikes on the truck and brought them back out.
How far back in the desert were they that time?
Probably an hour. Yeah.
Good bit.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah, it was we didn't quite do so well. So no, getting the net was really difficult, and not many people spot that most people think, a nice little picture.
No.
But it's really difficult to ride. Yeah.
You're reminding me too much of Robert Fulton's ride when he kept falling off the bike.
Yes.
And how he set up that shot.
And managed to fall off in his own film.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a guy in the early 30s.
32?
Yeah, 1932.
32.
And he rides around the world on a Douglas motorcycle.
Okay.
And he came from a wealthy background, the Mack truck background.
Right.
So money wasn't an object, so the bike was prepared by the factory, and he had what would have been the best movie equipment, of course, at the time, and he made a movie on his own.
Cool.
And man, it's a good movie, and he, as James said, he falls off in the camera. He's riding towards the camera that's set up and manages to fall off.
My other favorite is the one where he rides across the bridge after dark, and there's a span missing in the middle of the bridge, and he and the bike drop into the dry river bottom.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that and survive after?
He woke hours later, sort of thing.
I need to brush up on my motorcycle films and reading and stuff.
Right, this.
Pretty much limited to Jupiter's travels and
Right.
around so far.
Yeah.
There's a lot. A lot comes down to the writing of the book, whether it's in my mind, if it has any note, and that's where Jupiter's Travels is, because he was a writer. It's a good book, and there's a wonderful one called Smith and Son, and this Smith, Adam Smith, I think his name was, or might be the son. He was a junior reporter in South Africa, from Britain. He'd been sent out to South Africa, and at the end of his time, 2 years or something, he said, you can come home now. And a young man, he walked down the road and thought, time's up, I've got to go back to the miseries of Britain, but and he's going by, and he walks past a motorbike shop, and he goes, I could ride home. And he goes in and buys a second-hand 200cc Triumph Tiger Cub, possibly the worst bike that's ever been made by Britain, and he successfully rides home from Cape Town to London.
Awesome.
And that became his, that was, where, and then he went on to have a life, became a very successful journalist, writer, television presenter and adventurer and all sorts of things. Had a family. And they carted this bike that he had once upon a time, and he read stories to his kids, how he'd been chased by lions and, And one day, we'll go and ride together. And his son gets to 18 or so, and he's about to leave home, they realise he's on the cusp of adulthood, and they really should have an adventure together, and they should go for a motorbike ride. And Smith had never ridden again; he'd only had that one adventure, and ultimately they get another Triumph Tiger Cub, and they get it restored, and his original one restored, and on these two 200cc Triumph Tiger Cubs, they ride from London to Cape Town the opposite way in 1983 or 4, I think. The first one was in the 50s, and then he returned, and because he's a writer, again the story is wonderful. You know, it's not just I went through this village and we went, you know, down the river and down the, you know, if travel can be repetitively boring. But no, it's a stunning book.
Oh, look out for that. So it's Smith and Son.
Smith and Son.